Excellent. So with that, we will go on to our consent items. Tonight we have one, the Old Max Steel Processing final findings. So I would like to entertain a motion for approval of the consent items.
I'll move to approve the consent items.
Excellent.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent items on our agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 It is It is unanimous, and so the findings are approved. Moving on, we will go to citizen input on non-agenda items. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on non-agenda items. Each person will be given 3 minutes to speak. Staff and the Planning Commission will make every effort to respond to questions raised during citizens' input before the meeting ends or as quickly as possible thereafter. Is there anybody here to speak under citizen input on non-agenda items? That does not surprise me. So that is taken care of there. Moving on to new business, which there appears to be none. So we've closed that up. And now we will go ahead into our public hearing. Let me get this all ready. So the matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on the matter and are present in the chamber, please fill out a public testimony card and give it to the recording secretary. At the appropriate time, when your name is called, please step forward to the microphone. If attending online, please type in the chat your full name and whether you would like to speak as a proponent, opponent, or neutral on the matter. At the appropriate time, when your name is called, please unmute yourself to speak. In all cases, please state your name, address, and interest in the matter for the record. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate time to a spokesperson who will present to the entire group. You may be limited by time for your presentation. Generally, the applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. Proponents, opponents, and those thought neutral on the matter will each have 5 minutes to speak. The applicant will then have 10 minutes for rebuttal. All questions must be directed through me, the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access and to be entered into the permanent record. All written testimony received on this matter prior to the hearing shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards the applicable review criteria as indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the applicable land use regulations which the person believes apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on the issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damage in circuit court. Everyone present is encouraged to testify, even if it is only to concur with previous testimony. At this time, I would ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest, please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter. Anybody? No. Excellent. Also, if any member of the hearing body has had an ex parte contact with anyone prior to the hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time. Excellent. Does any member of the audience in the chamber or online have any questions of any commissioner regarding conflicts of interest or ex parte contact? No. As a review, the public hearing will be formatted as follows. City staff will give their report. The hearing body will ask any questions of staff regarding the report. The chair will open the public hearing for testimony. The applicant will be given not more than 15 minutes to present on the application. Proponents, opponents, and those neutral on the matter will then speak, in that order, for not more than 5 minutes each. The applicant will be given not more than 10 minutes for rebuttal. The hearing body will ask any final questions of staff and of the applicant. The chair will close the public hearing for new testimony. The hearing body will then deliberate on the application with no additional testimony unless specifically allowed by the chair. This may result in the reopening of the public hearing. A decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure that has been outlined for this hearing? I'm getting better at this. We will now open the public hearing regarding DR 21-02, American Welding, and we will start with our staff report. Take it away, Brianna.
Thank you very much, Chair Padden. Hello, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Brianna. I'm an Associate Planner with the City of Canby. And as Chair Padden said, we'll be discussing the design review for American Welding tonight. Here's the subject property. It's in the southeast corner of First Avenue and Hazeldale Way. It is 1.54 acres and currently undeveloped, and there is an access easement over the driveway to the south that I have highlighted with a blue circle. Here's the zoning for the property and surrounding. It's zoned M1 light industrial when it's within the industrial area overlay. You can see it is surrounded by compatibly zoned areas, highway commercial, commercial manufacturing, other light industrial, and to the north is county land, what we call Area J. Here are the applicable criteria for the design review. They are pretty standard. We're going to look at parking and loading, the standards for the M1 zone as well as the overlay zone, and our design requirements for site and design review. So the proposal as a whole is a 17,500 square foot building. Right now, it is intended to be programmed primarily for American Welding with a warehouse of 7,750 square feet and an accessory office of 2,750 square feet. And those are the south spaces there. They are also proposing a shell space, which is 7,000 total square feet of spec space. In their application, they kind of proposed either breaking it up into 2 smaller tenant spaces to be rented out, or they also discussed potentially expanding into that area. They are proposing 28 total parking spaces and 6 loading berths. The dimensional standards, I didn't outline them here, but in the M1 and IO overlay, they do meet setbacks, height, lighting, vehicle and bicycle parking, and landscaping. I'm happy to go into any of those, but they do meet the standard and they are expanded on in the staff report. Secondly, here are the design standards. It's broken up into 4 aspects. We have parking, transportation/circulation, landscaping, and building appearance and orientation. And you can see that they do meet or exceed each of these 4 aspects. For the parking, I wanted to just break it down just a bit. One, because I think I confused more than I clarified in the staff report. I will take that. And also because we do have a bit of spec space here, so we just want to make sure we are covered. You can see for American Welding, we know how their space is going to be programmed, and they are going to be required to have 14 total spaces. For the speculative space, we gave them the sort of most intensive parking scenario, and that is because office would be the most intensive, but offices are only allowed ancillary to another use, so there's no chance that all 7,000 square feet of that would be office space. So I've kind of broken it out. I made the office probably bigger than it even would end up being, again, just to demonstrate that with that most intensive scenario, they do still meet the standard because they would be required to have 13 spaces. So 14 plus 13 is 27, and they're proposing a total of 28 parking spaces. Okay, for loading. So technically for a building of this size or a tenant space of American Welding size, only 1 industrial loading berth is required. And you can see those 4 loading berths to the left here, which is the south. Those are all intended to serve the American Welding space. The two tenant, or the two spec spaces, also have one loading berth each, and those do not meet industrial dimensional standards, but they do meet commercial berth standards. And so this kind of, we're bringing it to the Planning Commission as, a discussion point. We don't want to sound overly concerned, but we do have kind of an aspect of a spec building here, and we just want to make sure that, we are accommodating kind of whoever will go into that space, but also accommodating our standards as well. So, two scenarios here. If you were to break up the two spec spaces into those two smaller 3,500 square foot tenant spaces, neither of them would even be required to have a loading berth, so those would kind of be, an extra for the tenant. If they were to be combined into one 7,000 square foot tenant space, they actually would be required to have one loading berth. And in that case, we would need to make sure that the dimensions, if they're going to use a loading berth, can accommodate the use. But again, only one industrial loading berth is required for the entire building because it is between 5,000 and 25,000 square feet. So overall, they are over loading berthed, but I do want to point out just the dimensions of what's happening here. And so for this loading, we included a specific condition of approval. We have two more kind of touch points where we can review to make sure it is a compatible use going into those tenant spaces. That is the site plan review as well as the business license review. The spaces will be shells, so any sort of, tenant trying to accommodate their business in that space will have to go through a site plan review. And at that point, we'll look at the loading again. And then also at the business license, that's kind of our last checkpoint, and we can put notes in the business license to kind of carry this through. And so the proposed condition of approval reads, the proposed vacant tenant spaces contain one loading berth each, and the applicant shall confirm during the city's site plan review and/or business license review process that adequate loading berth area is available for these tenant spaces. Changes to the dimensions of loading berths will be subject to city modification approval as determined by Canby Development Services. And lastly, I do want to point out that a development agreement is a possible condition of approval. This is kind of a very minute aspect of the proposal, so we do believe we can probably capture it in a site plan and business license review, but it is up to the commission if a development agreement, if we want to discuss making that a condition of approval, we could do that as well. A development agreement is a legal document that's recorded, just kind of stating everything that we're stating here, and the fee associated with that will just be our legal review. So that's, it's a separate process. So we can approve this and add that as a condition of approval if you deem it necessary. And lastly, this piece of code I just want to read because we don't look at loading berths too much here. It says the Planning Commission may exempt a building from the loading berth requirement or delay the requirement. That's kind of what we're proposing here, based on findings that loading berths are not needed for a particular building or business. Okay, lastly, we did receive agency comments from Direct Link, Public Works, Canby Utility, and Canby Fire, and we received no public comments. We received conditions of approval kind of standard to the design review from those agencies. And so with that, our recommendation as staff is that Planning Commission approve application DR 22-02, subject to the conditions of approval provided in the staff report.
Chair Padden, I just wanted to add a little bit more as well on this item about the loading berths. Just a little bit further clarification. Through our coordination with Clackamas County, there's what's called Development Direct. That process, we pretty much at this point are seeing everything that comes through Clackamas County. We're seeing things we actually don't really want to see on detail of interior tenant improvements. That's being kind of worked on, but there's a high level of coordination between us and Clackamas County So we do believe the site plan review and the business license process is appropriate. Part of the reason we're bringing this up is we have to look at the project not only for what it's being approved, but later or subsequently what could happen in that building. So we look at it from the perspective of code compliance, issues that might come up later. Given that the applicant owns the building and there is a site plan review process, we do feel there's a high level of confidence here, but we're also wanting to put this on the record. In case there's questions, the staff report will identify what's going to be included in that building so that people don't come back later and say, well, yeah, but so there's actually a record of that. So that would help us in that process of dealing with modifications later on in the process. So just wanted to clarify that looking at this, not trying to overlook at this, but essentially address it from our code perspective and put it on the record that is part of the staff report. So just wanted to add that.
Okay. Is that everything?
That is it for my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so now questions from the commission, and we will start with Commissioner Jarosh.
Don, I just have a quick question about what you were talking about, that, the site plan review process. I don't know, what's the city's history of compliance with that? Do they do a good job? Have they done a good job historically? Is that why we feel good about that?
We do. We actually need to sign off on applications. And so there is a process already embedded that really kind of takes care of that. I think part of this is making the applicant aware of this as well, that there is this issue there. They've also identified it in their own narrative that they're saying, yeah, we're committed to putting in uses that would not be where you not have excessive large trucks in those bays, and or you would accommodate that with a commercial/industrial activity that did not need that level of loading space. So our site plan review is administrative. It's a type 1 process. You guys do not see those. Those are signed off for every commercial building, every single family home that's built in the city. There's a large amount of activity that is in that process. And again, it's coordinated through Clackamas County. And we're even having to sign off on, like I'm saying, interior stuff. We have to check boxes and people are complaining, well, you guys are the last step in the rung. And so we're seeing, like at this point, like there's a high level of because we have to sign everything off, even stuff that we're not involved in at this point. So yes, we will know about it.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's it? Okay, Commissioner Calkins?
Yeah, I guess just some further clarification on the commercial versus the industrial use besides the size. I guess I'm still kind of confused on this. So is there a codified use for each of those where you're only allowed to do certain things with that size of bay?
The issue really is they're allowed the range of uses, and they don't know what that is, and so in other words, that's why they're putting that in there. Really, I think it comes down to the applicant's awareness of this issue, and I think they're fully aware of that. There's definitely, some level of trust here that's going on. Again, that's why we're putting it into the staff report. We feel confident as staff that they're on board with that, and they're saying, yeah, it'll be a commercial activity, and it may not perhaps even need a loading bay. So that's the other part of this as well. So I think I think part of this is, there could be a development agreement. We do those for other applications. I think that's a little excessive perhaps for this application tonight before you, because I feel like the applicant's already aware of it and is committed to it, doing the normal process, which we feel would be complete and sufficient to address the issues, if that answers your question. So yes, they could put in something, they're gonna have to scale it to whatever that is there, and obviously they own the other part of that business. It's unlikely they're gonna cause themselves problems, because that would be where the situation would be.
There are limited commercial uses allowed in the industrial zone, but they aren't the most intensive kind of, retail restaurants, things like that are not. It's more wholesaling, maybe a showroom, things like that.
Okay.
You could have a, construction, a company, that would be a good example, or perhaps might go in there, and they would be contractors that would have smaller equipment, trucks and those kinds of things, not like giant, semis or anything like that, but that could be a use that would go in there.
Okay, gotcha. That's good. Thank you.
Excellent. Commissioner Hutchinson
Nothing, thank you.
and Commissioner Ellison.
So just point of clarity, they are overberthed for the size of the building as it is.
Correct.
And they meet the requirement for the square footage in the zoning.
Correct.
So really, it's knowing all of that, what I'm hearing you saying is that they're taking the risk of not being able to rent the single space or two individual spaces based on their configuration of
Correct.
a roll-up door.
Yes,
Awesome, thank you.
thank you.
And for my part, I'm gonna just beat the horse a couple more times. I just wanna make sure this is just for education of myself. By sort of pigeonholing those berths to commercial, it's easier for them to it's easier for a building to be commercial in the light industrial rather than light industrial in the commercial. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, and so as long as it's like commercial / feeding into industrial, we're good with that.
Warehousing, exactly, yes.
Okay, excellent. The other question I have, oh, go ahead.
No,
Okay, the other question I have, and I apologize, I'm kind of channeling Commissioner, former Commissioner, oh my gosh, Mills here. In the report, I noticed on a lot of these plans, it references, when it says overhead door at grade level per door schedule, nowhere in any of these plans could I find a door schedule that talks specifically about the doors.
Okay.
So was that originally part of the packet and just not included, or was that never given to the city?
Everything has been included in the packet.
Okay,
So what I personally did was actually just measure the doors on the regular
plan?
plan. Yeah.
Okay.
So you may be completely right, there may not be a detail.
okay, if we could just look into that, just for my curiosity's sake, if there is
Absolutely.
one that can be provided, because it's referenced several times in here, I think it should be part of the record,
Gotcha.
if that makes sense. And I think that was my only question for, in the final findings, it says specifically that the proposed development exceeds the requirements as far as the loading berths, but then in your thing, you call out that it doesn't quite match up. Was that an error, or does one supersede the other?
I think my intention was that the dimensions don't match up to what would be an industrial berth.
Okay,
Yeah, so
Okay.
the latter statement is correct.
okay, sounds like a plan. That is all I had for my questions. So with that, if there's no other questions of the commission, we will go ahead and bring the applicant up for their presentation. And then if we could set the clock at 15 minutes. And please be sure to state your name, address, and your affiliation for the record before starting.
Computer's not wanting to cooperate. I'm Ben Hegerman with VLMK Engineering. Our address is 3933 Southwest Kelly Avenue in Portland, Oregon. I am part of the applicant team. We are the AE consultant for American Welding. Thanks, Brianna, for a great presentation. I think you covered most of our topics that we have. The first slide that we're showing is a schematic rendering of the building. The tenant space to the right that's closest to the screen would be the American Welding office space, and then you can see around the back side to the right is where the loading space would be. You can see the western facade, the front face facing Hazeldale, North Hazeldale is, or South Hazeldale, sorry, is made up mainly of aluminum storefront openings. And like Brianna mentioned, the height is below the maximum required for the industrial park. I think the next slide shows our schematic site plan. You can see the existing shared driveway to the south off of Hazeldale Way was put in place during the original subdivision partition. So that was planned due to the proximity to the intersection, not having enough clearance space. So that will be the main driveway. It's an existing driveway that will use the existing shared easement to come onto the site from the south. The majority of vehicle traffic will circulate the parking lot on the west side of the building, and then the industrial yard area to the east side of the building, as you can see. The loading berth discussion, towards the southeast corner on the east side of American Welding space are the two larger berth spaces. It was never intended for any of these spaces to be occupied by a large industrial semi-truck, per se, a 53-foot trailer. Just, it's not feasible with the turning movements to get a large truck back in that space, have them turn around. Minimum dimensions would be, 125 to 135 feet required to back a truck in there. This clearly, the size of the site kind of determines what trucks are going to be able to be back there. The doors are at grade level as opposed to a dock level door, where typical semi-truck trailers would back up to a dock level door. All the loading berths that we're proposing are at grade level, which is a little bit more in line with a box truck, like a FedEx truck, or now we see Amazon trucks, that type of a truck where there's plenty of turning movement in there. We also supplied a turning template for a fire truck back there that meets the minimum standards. The next slide is our landscaping. You can see we have a variety of deciduous and evergreen trees to provide beauty throughout the year. Minimum screening requirements for the yard area to the east, plus a security fence with a security gate that isn't quite showing up on that plan, but it would be mid-span of the building on the south side in that main drive aisle that goes back to the loading yard. Electrical transformer on the north side facing First Avenue, which is screened as well. And then I think the next slide is our site lighting plan. All of our proposed site lighting is on the building. It's wall-mounted wall packs on the building. We're not proposing any pole-mounted site lighting at this time. And then these are some examples of some jobs that American Welding works on. So American Welding doesn't do in-house manufacturing of any kind. They're a contractor that works on-site at construction sites. So these are some examples of what they'll, their workday will start in Canby at the facility. The workers will load up their trucks with the tools and things they need to go out to the job site and perform their daily tasks, which consists mainly of steel erection and on-site welding. And here's another example. They do stud welding for metal decking, miscellaneous welding. I think the next slide shows, more of a residential project with a steel railing and other welding type processes. Steel roof decking. You'll see a lot of these on the left side of the screen. These are pretty typical of that of the Pioneer Industrial Park. These buildings, concrete tilt-up buildings with a steel infrastructure that require a lot of on-site welding. And again, some more examples, steel staircases, some other steel erection and on-site welding, concrete tilt-up buildings, and steel frame structures. And then these are some examples of buildings actually within the Pioneer Industrial Park. BBC Steel is just outside the park on Township. That American Welding Services has provided their welding services throughout the Canby area. They've been in business since 1985 and are currently located in Oregon City and will be relocating their main facility into Canby. So You guys want to include anything about daily operations, or?
Yeah. I'm Mike, one of the owners of American Welding. Ben hit it pretty good. The majority of our employees typically just drive to the jobs themselves. We have a handful that show up every day, grab utility trucks, and we dispatch from there. And the biggest thing for us is we're just wanting to keep everything inside. Just with the value of, everyone knows tools in back of trucks. I can't just have a yard outside, and people climbing fences. So it's really just a glorified parking garage for us is all we do. We don't manufacture anything. There's no waste out of it, nothing. It's literally just getting equipment, trucks inside. So, it's out of sight and we go from there. So, on an average day, there's really only 5 to 6 employees that will show up here and they're gone all day until, 4 or 5 and come back, park inside, and we're gone. So that's kind of the reasoning behind the amount of doors on the back for us is just to get the trucks inside, even though it's not really, I guess, needed, but that's what we do, so. But.
Yeah, and I guess to further elaborate on that, the application meets all criteria within the Canby Development Code. So three employees per acre, the parking, building height, we fall within all those categories. So it's all, our findings are clear and objective in the sense that we're not expecting any exceptions along that way. I think that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So if you want, you can just hang out there because I can't see that there's many people out there looking to speak on this as a proponent or opponent.
Right.
So I wasn't sure if the person that you had online wanted to participate at all.
No, I think she's just an observer.
Observing, okay,
Yep.
great. So with that, we'll go ahead and conclude that. Now we will go ahead and move into so now we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing for proponents. Are there any proponents that wish to speak? No. Are there any? Sure. Yes. Oh my goodness, yes. Sorry about that. So we're going to go ahead and open things up for proponents. Are there any proponents that wish to speak in favor of this application? Seeing none, we'll move on to opponents. Are there any opponents that wish to speak on this application? Seeing none, we will move on to those in neutral. And there are none. So with that, normally we give you 10 minutes for rebuttal, but clearly there's nothing to rebut. So I will go ahead and open it up for questions of the Planning Commission on anything on final questions. Okay? So, and then we'll start with Commissioner JaRoche.
Thank you. I had one question. I was looking at both the staff report and the attachment A, the narrative, and I heard what you said about number of employees, but I can't find the number of employees. I searched for the word employee. I can see where we say that it meets our requirements, but how many employees do you have?
We're about 20.
20, okay.
But like I said, the majority of them are,
Right,
drive to jobs. So, on an average day, there might be 5, 6, 7 that are, so the majority of them will literally just show up, get trucks and leave. There might be 1 or 2 on hand all day long. So.
Okay. Thank you.
I thought there was something. I think I looked at the.
I couldn't find it.
I thought there was one.
He couldn't find it either, so.
It's further down in the criteria response, down in the code section,
Okay.
probably down on page 55 or so.
Yeah, because that was one, if you paid attention to any of our last meetings, you probably keyed in that that's a big one for us.
Yeah.
And so I was specifically looking for that, and I thought for sure I had seen the number. But,
Yeah, and just to elaborate, on a 1.5 acre site, at 3 employees per acre, even if we keep 8 employees on site, we still are above the 3 per acre, so.
okay.
Yeah, I looked for the word employee and 20. Anyway, I'm trying to, but, all
Okay.
right, thank you.
Commissioner Calkins?
No questions at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Hutchinson?
No questions, thank you.
And Commissioner Ellison?
No questions.
And I have no further questions. So with that, we will go ahead. I think it's safe to close the public hearing, and we will go into our deliberation. So I think this can be pretty quick. Commissioner Jarosh, any thoughts to share?
No, thank you.
Calkins? Hutchinson?
Nope.
Ellison?
No, sir.
For my part, I will just say thank you very much for being so thorough in your application. And I think that you will be an excellent addition to, if what you're getting up here is any indication that this is probably going to work out, I think you are one of the folks that we're looking to, bring into our industrial park. And so it's great to see you folks on board. So with that, I think I will entertain, if you could, Brianna, if you could bring up the motion, please. Let's get that up and then I'll do that. Okay, so with that, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the application DR 22-02, subject to the conditions of approval provided in the staff report.
I'll second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded to approve. Where did you start?
Application DR 22.
Oh, yes, application DR 22-02, subject to the conditions of approval provided in the staff report. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous, so the motion carries. Go forth, and I hope you win your contract to weld your own building. Thank you very much for showing up tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, we just couldn't go.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, wow, that was awesome. We moved right through there. So we have no other public hearings tonight, so we will go ahead and move on to our next section, which is the combination code amendment update discussion.
Chair Padden, this is a continuation of discussion on one particular item from the last hearing on both code amendments and the fee updates. There is one, the Planning Commission did recommend approval to send to council the code amendments with the exception of the remand process to come at a later date with amendments, and that later date is tonight, I'm hoping, with amendments moving forward on the permit fee, tying them to an inflation index, setting a trigger for review in 2 years. That was the motion and decision from the last Planning Commission. I wanted to bring up one, can we show that, Brianna? The item that was in question from the last hearing, which is regarding the remand process, that under 3A, B, and C, those criteria that there were questions by the commission on those as to whether or not there could be additions or amendments to A, B, and C to make the wording seem less
Harsh.
yes, harsh
Of
to the
us?
planning commission. Trying to think of the right word here.
Less accusatory.
Yeah, and I did talk to Joe Lindsay, our counsel, on this. I think the one thing that keeps coming back on the three, that item C in context typically comes back that the commission did not adequately consider all of the information which was pertinent to the case. And, Joe and I did have a conversation around this, and his main comment was, yes, that's new information, obviously, that the Planning Commission did not have before, not that the original application. In other words, when you see it on remand, it's coming back with additional information that you have not seen before. So really, it's not about judging your decision of the first round of this, if that makes sense. So let's say scenario, Somebody submits an application, planning commission denies that application, applicant appeals, it goes to the council. They provide a whole bunch of additional items that you've not seen, things like employee count and sound assessment that you've not seen before. That doesn't really weigh on your original decision. It's if that helps at all.
And
Well-
not change the wording, is that what we're saying?
Well, I'm just saying that you have an original decision, so this wording really, under C, is really that the commission did not adequately consider all the information which was pertinent to the case. Largely, these are coming back on remand to you. Therefore, they have new information which you've not yet seen. So the new information is information, or additional information is information you did not see before.
Sure.
Can I,
Okay.
So,
go ahead.
so I think, and I might be echoing some folks' opinions here. That is a very clever way of wording that from a legalese point of view, but I don't buy it. That specifically says that the commission did not adequately consider all of the information which was presented to the case. There is no other way of saying, well, there's new information, da, da, da. No, that specifically, anybody who would read that with a sentient mind would say that the decision, the reason this is coming back is because the people that saw it first did not
The commission was inadequate.
Hold on.
Yes.
Let's do,
And
That's what it stuck. That's the primary point.
So,
Chair Patton, why can't we just have exactly what he said as option D?
can we make an option D?
I mean, we can suggest that.
Can we
Ultimately,
hammer
council.
out an option D right now?
Council, yeah, we could absolutely, and I would really like to do that because this is all going forward to the council on the 18th, is my
They have
belief.
the final
No.
say,
So-
but we can just advise them.
my perspective is what we've seen is that we got corrected information. And is it new or is it corrected? What we got was wrong. And they came back and said, oh, never mind, that was wrong. That's not, in my mind, new. They made a mistake.
Yeah.
They messed up,
They need to own it.
yeah.
Okay, well, if you guys have suggestions, I will bring that forward to the council as part of the packet.
Okay.
For consideration. That's their call in the end, yeah.
So what do we think?
Well, I'm of two minds. I think there should be an option D for new information that doesn't make it sound like we didn't do our jobs.
Yep.
I also think that, and I was wondering, Don, if this was a part of your conversation with Mr. Lindsay about what constitutes new information and where is the line on when it has to be really a new application because it's changed so drastically that really it's like more of a brand new thing, or it's not new information. They're just trying to see what they can get, and then if it didn't work, well, now we're going to change some things. Like I think was what you were kind of getting at in your example. Was that a part of the conversation?
Yeah, and there's a due process involved in that. The planning commission has limited authority over things dealing, you have to give the opportunity for an applicant to have the ability to administratively address the issue at a step above to address those items, and that is the council's role. So the planning commission really is not authorized to deny applications, and that's, essentially to say you're denied and you need to resubmit. You have to give the applicant the opportunity to appeal that decision to another body, which is the council. They have the ability to remand that back to the planning commission. The planning commission does have the authority to continue an item, but not to, deny and say you need to resubmit.
Well, and the wording of 3 is overturn, right? They're really not overturning it, they're referring it. So maybe D wouldn't be appropriate. Maybe it should be another numbered point.
Saying something like
Because-
there is additional or changed information in the application that requires further review by planning commission or something like that.
Yes, errors were made in the application that have since been corrected.
Say-
Check.
Do you want to repeat that? So, yeah.
I said there is new, additional or changed information in the application that requires further review by the planning commission.
Or errors were made in the
Or-
application
Yeah, we can add that to it too. That's where.
that wants
And so
once
council wants to send
corrected.
it back to us.
Yeah.
As the
and see that, yeah, but that's
subject
a,
matter experts,
yeah.
right?
Updated.
but that's not, see, I wouldn't call that an overturn, right?
I would call
So,
that, it's remand based on errors or omissions
Yeah,
on behalf of the applicant
Addition
and
or update.
turn back to the planning commission for reconsideration, right? I mean, that's what we're saying.
Could it all,
It is-
we also need the word omission, because maybe they didn't, we've seen cases where there was a mistake, the number was then and then it became then, and, or was there something omitted that, so that is also new information, but,
So I'm kind of getting, like, at the beginning of it, we would say, it's being remanded for additional or updated information not previously reviewed by the planning commission. Does that make sense?
I still think we add errors and
Yes.
omissions on the part of
Corrected,
the
yeah.
applicant.
Okay.
yeah. Errors and omissions need to be part of that. They need to own it.
Additions or updated information to correct errors and omissions to be re-reviewed by the planning commission?
Do the whole sentence again?
Okay, so addition or updates based on errors and or omissions to be re-reviewed by the planning commission. Does that make sense?
I have to write it out in my head.
Commissioner Hutchinson, wouldn't it be an overturn though? Because it's only, I'm trying to because it only goes to them if we said no and they're appealing. So they are technically,
They're not
Sending it back
overturning
to
it, they're
us.
not ruling.
but they're not ruling.
Yeah, they're not
That's
overturning our
right,
decision, they're
okay.
sending it back to us.
Yeah.
And that was the argument you were making at the previous meeting, was like, oh, they could just punt right back to, and then we're right back to square one again, right? But
Yes.
But I think the characterization of what you were saying was the sticking point, not only to the function of what they're doing,
Yes.
but then how they're characterizing it in the first place. It's just wrong.
Yes.
And, well, and then, and for the customer, it's nice to see this codified in that if I screw up, I've got a chance to fix it before they kick me out.
good point.
Yes.
And that it actually is a sign of them getting a second chance without having to do a new application. So it works for everybody, I think.
So,
Could you read that
yeah,
back?
so additions or updates based on errors and/or omissions to be re-reviewed by the planning commission.
I think, do we need correct in there?
The council remands the case due to errors, omissions, or bona fide new information in the case. Does that cover it? I just had to write it out because I can't say it out loud.
What was that again?
The council remands the case, so this would be like section D, right? One of the instances. The council remands the case due to errors, omissions, or bona fide new information in the case.
So we want to continue the language that the commission, they all start with that the commission,
Yeah.
so that
Also-
the commission can review updated or corrected, I mean, just word it that way. I mean, wordsmithing by group is horrible.
And those are all
we could-
overturned.
We could change number 3, so it says the city council shall overturn or remand.
Yes.
Oh,
We could
yeah.
add that there, and then D could just say, the commission is being presented with
Yes.
new information or information due to omission or error.
Or they could say,
Da, 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 da.
we weren't
That sounds
exhibiting
good.
good planning.
Yeah.
So that's back to your point. So the city council shall overturn or remand the decision to the planning commission.
Only when one.
Only
of the
when one,
following-
and then,
Yeah.
what was so can we go
And
back?
then D would be, to continue the same wording, would be that the commission,
Was unable,
Received,
oh.
or corrected.
the commission will receive corrected or,
I think that the commission will receive and then pick up with the one that we had originally said.
yes.
Which is that the commission will that the commission will, I don't know if receive is the right word, because it'd be additions or updates based on errors or omissions to be re-reviewed by the plan. I mean, not sure for their, what.
Reconsider.
Yeah, or review or something along those lines.
Yeah, if you read A, B, and C as the commission did not correctly, the commission did not observe, the commission did not adequately. And when it's the applicant's fault, none of those are covered,
then
right?
would say, we'd
Yeah.
say,
Or
You
maybe,
could say errors were made in the application that the commission, that will
The
be
commission
corrected.
did not receive full or accurate information in the initial.
how about,
Well,
how about that the commission re-reviewed new information, correcting errors or omissions?
On the part of the applicant.
Yeah.
or
Yes.
will, the commission will, right? Because we haven't done
Yes.
it yet. The commission will review
About has
new
the
information
Yeah.
not previously presented, due to changes, errors, or omissions.
So go ahead and write back out what our last thing was, and then let's read that. Sorry, Don.
Where's the, right, committee?
Commission.
We went through the other ones so quick, we need to give the folks a show.
The two on.
Except for there's not any booze or anything like that. Those people were totally drunk when they did that.
Well, didn't they mail them back and forth by horseback
There
and
was
stuff?
horses involved. Feather pens, I mean, come on now. What is this frilly stuff here?
Yes, we would.
Or we could maybe say, maybe more simply, that the commission did not receive accurate.
Correct or complete
Yeah,
information.
exactly, correct or complete. I'm just trying to simplify this, or complete information.
In the original application.
Yeah, I think that's perfect in the original application.
Okay.
So let me read this back. Application. So that the commission did not receive correct or complete information in the original application.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay, okay.
Are we good with that? So do we need to make a new motion?
Yes, I think I'd like you to, so that way you guys have fully vetted the code changes, all of them, including this. You already looked at the permit fee updates, and that way there's a recommendation from the planning commission to the council that then they will review.
So do you have what the original motion was?
I have most of it.
Okay.
So does the council then
So
ratify this?
that was, so recommend
That's their
approval to
thing.
send council.
Hold on a second, folks. What?
Okay. Recommend approval to send council code amendments with exception of remand process from council to come up at a later date with amendments, and moving forward with permit fees update tying to inflation index, setting a trigger for review in 2 years.
I move to approve the motion as just read by city staff.
I'll second the motion.
Well, this actually is what you already did last time.
Correct, but we're including
Okay, but are you going to amend, you're going to amend that then?
Amended.
with amendments for section 3, adding subsection D.
Yeah, but,
But part of this is you guys were referencing back to coming back
Yeah.
at a later date, so I think,
Is this a new?
So I need to,
You need
please,
to
so let's type up
refresh.
what you need us to read
okay.
and put it up on the screen. So that way we have it right.
Well, do we need to just do a new one?
We just need to have them
for
type up
just
what they
this,
want
or
us
do you
to.
want it to
I
be
would,
the
I would
whole
just
thing?
say, I mean, no, I think that probably, the last one you did is fine.
To make this easy,
It's
just have Brianna type up what we need to say, and we'll read it off that screen. And we don't need to discuss it
no
anymore.
pressure.
Is that all right?
Okay.
Otherwise,
an
we're gonna be
article over
going
the-
back and forth.
So-
and-
Saw an article over the weekend, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, it said Robert's Rules of Orders is 140 years old and it needs an update.
Yeah, well, I was having this conversation with Commissioner Ellison before people came in, and so, I mean, I was in student government and on both the college and the state level, and so we dealt with Robert's Rules of Order. And good, bad, or indifferent, as a chairperson, I will follow Robert Rules of Order to a point until it starts to hinder the ability for people to operate. And I am somewhat reluctant sometimes about Robert's rules, because there are people that have a better understanding of it than others, and they use it as a way to bully the conversation. And I will not, if ever I am chair, I will not allow that to happen. It's unacceptable.
I've had that conversation with Joe Lindsay, same thing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just glad, I feel like our rewording is something that will be good for council.
Yes.
And for us, totally fair. There was a certain counselor was not happy with some of my comments from the last meeting, so I'm glad we all worked it out and everyone will be happy.
It's fine. If we made everybody happy all the time, then we're probably dreaming.
Well, it's just a sign I need to try harder, really.
Yeah.
You know, I used to think making sausage was an easy thing, and then my brother got a sausage stuffing set up for Christmas, and he's been cranking, I mean, our first barbecue was for Easter.
Yeah.
Lots of delicious stuff, and took a lot of effort, and so it's like, yeah, it's all hard.
Yes. Well, the trick I find, I have a friend that makes a lot of them, and he has found that the trick is to like mix up your stuff, like mix up the filling, and then cool it back down, get it as cold as possible, and then run it
Add
back.
ice sometimes,
Yes, because otherwise it just becomes a gooey mess and it becomes a problem.
yeah, like pate.
Yes.
Anyone been leaning on the cuts first about a food cart pod? They've got all this space right over there.
Yes. I was meaning to tell some of the food cart folks here that next year, if they're looking for some business, they need to go out to the Hood River Hard Cider Festival, because there was only like 4 food vendors there, and the lines were insane. Luckily, we got there early, so we got everything early, but by the time we were through, like, the line was stretching from one end of the fairground to the other in front of each place. It was insane.
So we're bringing it up right now.
All right, here we go.
Okay, so I'd like to entertain a motion. Who wants to read it?
Oh, I thought you wanted to.
No, it's fine, someone else can take it.
Your mic's on.
Okay, so I'd like to entertain a motion to recommend approval to City Council code amendments as presented by staff, including addition of section 16.89.f.3.d, stating the commission did not receive correct or complete information in the original application and previously reviewed permit fee updates.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the motion Are there any questions or discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. It was unanimous, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Bam. And I will just say, this is not to stir up a hornet's nest, but just so city attorney, Mr. Lindsay knows, he's got to get up pretty early in the morning to get one over me, okay? I call BS on that one. Just letting you know. I saw where we were going there. It's like, no, that is not the answer to the question that we sent back. So,
Okay.
bam, good job. Anything else under that section, public hearing section?
Understanding that. Okay. No.
Okay. So we'll move on to items of interest from the planning staff.
Chair Patton, just a few updates, kind of as future items for hearings. There are a number of kind of pent-up project hearings, those you've not seen yet. They're going to be probably late summer. In the interim, we have a few lighter agendas coming up. In light of that, on May 23rd, our next Planning Commission, I will be giving an update on the housing production and economic opportunity assessment work that we're doing. So that gives you an update as to what's happening. You'll eventually be seeing the whole document, but I think it'll be helpful in context to see that and what we're reporting back to you on that. There will also be, on June 13th, a lighter hearing. We'll have the Historic Preservation Plan. Commissioner Jarosh brought that forward. There's some updates to that are happening, slight updates, and there's some code sections that need to marry with the Historic Preservation Plan. 3 code sections in particular. That would be before you there'll be a presentation, and I'm anticipating Carol Palmer, and will probably be involved with that presentation as well. So that's on the 13th. The dog park, just as a quick update on that, there was a pre-application conference submitted today to Clackamas County for the portion in the county. There will also be a review of the portion in the city, and that would be coming through the Planning Commission. At the point that application is both the county information and the city information has been compiled. I'm not saying that that's going to be on the 13th, but we'll be giving you an update. Hopefully we'll have information from the county on the process for the dog park at that point. On June 27th, I don't have the hearing item, but we may be getting back into hearings on that, or the next hearing in July. So that's kind of as far out as we can predict at this point. But like I said, there's a bunch of items, and they're fairly large, that will be coming in the summer. And then on May 18th, as I mentioned before, City Council will be reviewing the code updates. Thank you for your input tonight and the permit fee updates. The code updates will be on the 18th. The fee updates will be part of the June 15th hearing for the entire city budget. That'll be done by resolution. So those are the main updates that I had at this point. Just maybe one other one is we are gearing up, hoping to have authorization from council on the comprehensive plan budgeting and the transportation system plan budgeting. We hired a consulting firm to do a scope of work, detailed scope of work for that. That's going to be going through the budgeting process, so the budget committee will be involved with that review. That's coming up on the 19th of May, the budget committee review process. I'm hoping that we'll have council's authorization to move forward. It'll be a several fiscal year project that will happen for the comp plan and the TSP. So we'd like to move that forward with, once council has approved that, move forward with an RFP as soon as possible over the summer, with the hope of hiring a consultant sometime in the fall and starting that process. You folks will all be involved with that process as well. So just, that's kind of all what we're doing right now. Well, maybe just one more update. We're actively looking to replace Eric Forcell and have some very good prospects to do so. So staffing will be back up to where it was, and that's a good thing.
Now, didn't you also say in your budget, you're putting in for an additional person, or no?
We are for an assistant planner as well, and that's partly, that would be partly covered by the anticipated permit fee update work. Even though we're not doing cost recovery, that the council's directive is to look at cost recovery. We have been historically under by quite a bit on everything in Canby in terms of permit fees. So that's bringing us more to par with the average of what other similar communities are having on their permit fees.
Okay. And then the comp plan thing, does that also include, has there been any, like regarding having a consultant look at the codes, or is that something that will come after the comprehensive plan update?
The codes, there will be additional,
Oh, my thing is, sorry.
do you want to say that again?
Yeah, so my question was, for the comprehensive plan update, does that include looking at the codes, or is that something that we could look at doing a consultant after the comprehensive plan is updated?
For sure, we will have the ability after the comprehensive plan. I'm hoping that as we, some things like new zoning districts clearly need to happen after the comprehensive plan. We will not know what those are completely. Some things, as we get through the housing needs and economic opportunity analysis, may reveal themselves that we need to do other amendments. There will be other code amendments coming forward to you, kind of the low-hanging fruit. We're still working on a kind of a next round of list on that. So there will be more coming forth, but I think the large ones that will address things like change of, different designations of zoning that might not be in existence will be part of that. Amendments to the code to address housing might be part of that as well. That could be things that are modifications to current code that come out of the recommendations for the housing that we adjust accordingly. I'm not sure what those are going to be, but that's another item that could be coming forth as well.
So something that just popped into my head is, when it comes to those sort of things, similar to the other, like the TSP and the comprehensive plan and all those other things, do most cities work on a update schedule, like everything's plodding along, but every 10 years or so many years, they say, look, we need to kind of do a review as to where the codes currently are, what sort of changes have happened, do we need to make any adjustments? Is that a thing that Canby, because I don't think Canby's done it, and it might be something to consider we bake into this whole process.
They're typically done every 7 years, and
Okay.
our last one was 37 years ago. So,
Unacceptable.
yeah.
So,
We are, yes, and
Good.
the hope is that we're bringing everything up to par with the comp plan, so it's a 20-year vision. You definitely, as a city, you want to do those check-ins, those periodic check-ins. Things change over time. I don't want to wait 20 years to go back and redo it, but I'd say every 7 years is a good mark.
Okay.
To do that. It's largely kind of up to the cities, and some of that comes to basically when you do your housing needs analysis and your economic analysis, and you don't have enough land for 20 years, you need to do a comp plan update. It's kind of where we're at.
Yes.
Not quite there, but you don't want to wait to that point, because urban growth boundary expansions can be challenging and they can take a lot of time. And that urban growth boundary expansion is going to be part of the assessment as well for the comp plan update. So it's pretty aspirational to try to combine all these things in a very short time frame, but that's our goal, is to move those forward.
swing for the fence, Don.
Swing for the
fence.
Yeah,
Okay. Anything else?
that's it for
Okay.
staff. Yep.
Any questions from anybody on that?
Thank you, Don.
You're welcome.
Excellent. So I did just want to, so moving on to items of interest and guidance from the Planning Commission. Did anybody have anything that they wanted to add? Commissioner Calkins?
I did. I mentioned at the end of the last meeting that
Yes.
read the 2010 TSP. But I wanted to ask if there would be a consensus from the commissioners to put something on the agenda, maybe on one of these lighter meetings, regarding us as in an advisory capacity to council about the traffic in the intersections and the things we talked about with DKS. And we can have a discussion about that and some ideas we can confer to them, because I remember during one of my conversations about this, Don mentioned, well, these things are kind of out of your realm. It's for the council to address. I think it's a big talking point in the community right now, especially with the growth in a lot of the things that we do deal with. And so, I have some ideas. I read the 2010 TSP, so I was wondering if there was enough interest to have a discussion about it, maybe an official one on the agenda in an upcoming meeting.
Like a work session?
Yes.
I see shaking of heads.
Yeah, and-
Would this make sense to have DKS brought in?
Yeah, and I think maybe if I can make a suggestion, I kind of like to, and again, we could absolutely do that. What would, Commissioner Calkins, what would you think the kind of the focus elements would be? It'd be helpful for me to understand the timing, because I think part of this is, should we have the comprehensive plan and TSP consultant on board? Should we do it before that? That's what's running through my head.
Gotcha. I don't know. I mean, I think, some of this, I was surprised reading some of this stuff, especially from a safety standpoint on the 2010. So we're looking at, and that information was like from 2005 to 2007, and the plan came out in 2010. So we're looking at like 15 years ago, at least, of some of this information, that the stuff that they said needed to immediately be addressed at that time is the same things we're talking about today. Haynes was busted then and had been before the 2010 TSP. A lot of those things, I don't know if we need DKS to be there, because I feel like we have all the information. It's like, what do we want to tell council from our viewpoint and what we deal with and what we see that maybe they could do something about? And maybe they won't want to, and maybe they will. But I think a lot of our boards and, Commissioner Jarosh in her capacity and her other board went to council and kind of said, here's what we're doing, here's what we want to do. I was wondering if we could, if we're being fair and judicial jurors, where we are, we follow the code and approve things based on that. They have the ability to say, maybe they do want to put a moratorium. Maybe they do want to say, we're going to do something here to try to keep South Ivy from going over, something like that. What do we advise them? I have a bunch of ideas that we don't want to go over right now, but that's my idea.
And I think just maybe a parallel but slightly different twist on that. We will be, as part of the TSP, there will be advisory boards on that, and if that's something that planning commissioners have an interest in, that's something that clearly would be important as we give updates to council. I'd like to kind of tie that into our TSP work, because there are many issues out there in the community that need focus. And I think that's, there's levels of service, there's how wide our road should be.
Noise.
Noise. There's a lot of different elements here about kind of, what is the adequacy of a road section? Can it handle two-way traffic? Should it handle one-way traffic? What are we judging that on? Is it AASHTO, which is the standard for engineering? Are there other standards we're judging that on? And then there's level of service and noise and those other things. So I think if we could have that process, I think that would be more fruitful to really concentrate, because that whole process for the TSP is very detailed in the scope, and all those issues essentially would be covered as part of that scope. And I think just maybe the report out with advisory group members to council might be more beneficial when we have something more concrete to address.
If I may, I'd like to,
Yeah.
this is, in listening to this conversation, this is kind of what I'm thinking and hearing, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or not. So what I hear is that Commissioner Calkins has read the TSP. He's identified that there are some things in there that directly tie into what we do here. And we, as a commission, have some questions about how we can have some influence over the process and that. I think where the problem becomes is that we can review that information and hear it, but if we want to make a recommendation to the city council regarding that, we essentially have to do what we did tonight and create code changes to send up to them that they would then say yes or no and put in a thing. So there's really, for me, it sounds like there's two different things. There's one of, let's talk openly as a group, whether it's ourselves and or the city council, to get an idea of, you know, where we sit on some of these issues, and then maybe how that would tie into the TSP, and then ultimately tie into us as a body creating some sort of code language that would tie into an update. Does that make sense?
Kind of, sort of.
Different too.
Oh, good. So in your professional opinion and in your experience, would us dabbling into the TSP realm get us potentially in a situation where we open ourselves up to LUBA issues?
I mean, I think
That's what I kind of
There's-
worry about.
maybe the layers and kind of separating those out. Ultimately, there would be code changes made. I think what I'm suggesting is a holistic, I'll answer your question, let me, bear with me. A holistic review of, you know, of our TSP, and that is incremental. But the first part of it is, I mean, one of the first rounds of information and discussion is going to be policy level stuff like levels of service and volume to capacity, which is how ODOT is looking at 99, and there's a whole standard there. What is it and what should it be? That's a council decision and directive. What our road profile should be is ultimately council directive, but with input. I think there's enough issues out there that we really need a clear platform to define these, like we would in the housing production and the economic opportunity, with advisory groups involved with that process to bring things forward in a discussion.
And that's separate from this body.
Well, no,
Or
actually,
is it in
this body could be members of those that advisory, that's what I'm suggesting.
yeah.
I think it's premature, in my opinion, to be doing code updates until we've evaluated the entire city. Our city's changed in the 12 years since the TSP was written. I don't know what all the answers are. I can't tell you that I do. I think part of that is that we need experts to come in and help us define what those issues are and what they should be, and then for ultimately to present that to council. So I'm suggesting a little bit of the answer is yes, but I would like that to be part of the TSP, and then ultimately that code section stuff that comes out of that would be subsequent to that, but it it needs to be done systematically, because I think there's a tendency, you know, some things are, you know, can be addressed by Public Works, but systematically, if we're talking about like one or two way roads or having a, you know, single lane road versus not, you can have unintended consequences in a pretty significant way if you're not looking at your entire system holistically. You know, and I think there's issues that need to be addressed in holistic fashion, brought to council in holistic fashion with advisory committee members. And this planning commission is a good body. We have several members on housing and economics now. We intend to have that same formula. So that doesn't necessarily get to Commissioner Calkins' immediate item, but that's what I would like to propose.
Here's what I'm thinking is, we're sort of in a holding pattern with some of the traffic challenges because we know there's some changes to be made. But when I talk to just individuals, that's the number one question to me is, you know, is what's going on with Haynes Road? What's going on with 99? What's going on with Ivy? And so to me, I would welcome a working session just so that we could dive into that and say, until things change, what are the options, if any, and who owns those? And maybe our recommendation to the council would be to get that publicized somehow in a, a layman's, here's what's going on, and here are the options. Because I think, my perspective, it's not well understood, probably because it's complicated.
We ran squarely into this when we were discussing the extension for Walnut Street, in that the council was just essentially putting something before us as a, it's like, okay, these long discussions have been going on, how we're updating the routing of this road. We need you guys to look this over and make sure, that you're on board with everything. And enough of the board had changed at that time that we didn't understand what was going on, and we rejected it because they were just, because it was all old news for them. But it was new for me, and so it was like, I actually had a council member call me up and say, so what's the problem? And it's like, we don't know what you're talking about. And we didn't understand the importance of the Walnut Street extension to the industrial park and everything else at the time. And so, I think that there's a lot of value to that, and especially when we're going back to the 2010 stuff, and we're talking about, we were just passing judgment on, private alleys, private streets, public streets. Don was just now talking about, well, what are our street standards? But I think kind of what he's getting to is as we go through the process that we plan to go through, most of these things should slot in to parts of that process as we go through it, right?
Thank you. And if there's a need for more immediate clarification to Commissioner Jarosh and Calkins' point, I'm happy to ask DKS if we just we could spend an evening just having a Q&A, but I guess part of it is the overall solution, I think, really, in terms of getting to all the changes that are possible changes are going to be made, that's a TSP level item. I think in the near term, and back to Commissioner Ellison's comment, I don't think our system is broken in terms of the level of review that's going on now. I think part of that is we have levels of service. They may not be very clearly understood by everyone, but they are actually documented, and with findings from professional consultants like DKS who go through that analysis, and with consultation with ODOT and Clackamas County. This is not done in a vacuum. So it's like, all these agencies are there together. So I don't think anything's slipping through the cracks, but I guess my point is, as we go forward into the future, there are many issues that I think will come into play about this community, including new roads. I would not be surprised if we're talking urban growth boundary expansion. If that's a possibility, we're going to need to serve those with roads, and where are those going to go, and what options are there, and kind of a visioning process. And I think that's part of that next step. And I'm not probably getting to the issue maybe at hand, but if there's a more interim work session piece, like we don't get this part of the review or walking through a traffic study report, if that was the context, I think that'd be good. I think,
What I would like to propose, and hear me out, is kind of a multi-pronged process here. So clearly there are some questions and some clarifications that members of the commission would like to receive up front. So what I'm going to throw out there is, if there are members of the commission that have specific questions regarding things, that those send them to planning staff, send them to Don, and then they can begin to work on those. We will then set up a work session where we can have a much more fluent dialogue about those things. There will be some pre-work done on trying to answer those questions. We will then talk amongst ourselves and bring up more questions and issues. And then essentially some of that information that we come up with is the groundwork for when the TSP starts, to say, these are things that are on the Planning Commission's mind. These are things that are already ready to go for you to look at and to consider. So that way, we are one of the groups first to the table with information to influence that process.
A working list, basically. Yeah, I think that, I'm just trying to define the purpose, because it's like, I think that would
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that would totally make sense.
Would that work?
Yeah, I think, so when is the TSP, the new TSP supposed to be?
I'm hoping, this again, the council needs to approve the budget for this, but I'm hoping we have a consultant on board like late fall is my hope. And that would, then we would probably be looking, aspirationally, again, with an urban growth boundary expansion, there's some unknowns, but I'm hoping that we have everything wrapped, the comp plan and the TSP and everything wrapped by June 2024.
It's going to be a couple of years.
So, my concern is in the meantime, we have stuff from the 2010 one that's going to show up again.
Yep.
That we already know about.
Yep.
And so my concern is, in the meantime, I think what the example that Commissioner Hutchinson said was very good, and I think it happens the reverse also. And in the meantime, we're a body of community members, and the reason that a planning position exists like this is we're not representatives of big business. We're representatives of the community that are in the area where we, are supposed to represent. And it is, I think, the council hears it. If you watch the meetings, we hear it. It's a major concern. And so, if we are advising, this stuff's coming up, maybe you should do something about it. What does that look like? I think that gives them the ability. They really look to the boards, I think, in the community, all the different boards, parks, everyone, to come to them to say, here's what we think. We're the subject matter experts on this. Here's some ideas, or this is a concern, you figure it out, or something. And then, so they can get to work to do that. So that's really what I'm
I'm saying that same thing. I'm saying we can do that work. We can have that meeting. We can create that list. We can send it up to them. But then it's ultimately, once we do that work and we pass it off to them,
right,
that's it.
Right.
We can follow up with them. We can pressure them.
Well, we don't. If they do it or not, that's in their purview. They're elected and they appointed us. They can do that. But I think we can rest knowing that we gave these concerns of the community and what we see as a body, what comes to us, and let them know and say, well, we pass this along.
Yeah, no, I'm totally fine with that. I just want to make sure there's a realistic expectation of A, what could ultimately happen with that information once it's passed off, and B, the time frame in which anything that we create is going to possibly influence the system. That it's not a matter of months, it's a matter of years.
And I think maybe the one intermediate piece here is I think the working list is a great idea. Chair Padden, I think, if we had these previous joint work sessions with Planning Commission and Council about items, maybe instead of like this being this massive overview, we get into the working list of items that you want discussed in the TSP, and then there's a list of concerns the Planning Commission has with Q&A. And I think that's an appropriate discussion, not about specific applications, but because I think part of this is an educational component to this. I don't think it's really so much about, whoa, we're massively deficient, we're gonna have to wait 2 years for a solution. I don't want that to be what this discussion appears to be. It's because it's not. I mean,
sure.
So essentially things are being addressed. I think there's questions about how are they being addressed adequately according to professional standards and according to our code. We're glad to go through those. And I think there is an educational piece to that about those items and discussion, just like we did before, but maybe more of a concentrated drill down with that. And back to your point, Commissioner Padden, the working list would need to be advanced, towards the TSP. But if that purpose is acceptable to the commission, those two items, I mean, I can start, you guys can be feeding me stuff, and then I could be working with DKS to set up a date.
Does that sound like a plan to everybody?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that it addresses, it's from a citizen perspective, not land use, not, traffic study speak. It's got to be, I'm a person driving down the road and, what's my commute to Central Point going to be like in a year from now? Because that's what I heard yesterday. So basic bare bones, how do we answer that question?
Yeah, and I think from this list, kind of what I'm envisioning is, we'll have this, you folks will be sending questions to the staff. We're gonna have our conversation, and then there's gonna be like, okay, here, for lack of a better term, here's the script.
Yeah.
So when you're interacting with a community member and they say, Haynes Road sucks, you can say, I'm glad you brought that up, and here are the talking points
And
about
so
Haynes
can the
Road.
mayor and council too.
Yes, and
Not
if you
just for
want,
us,
we
yeah.
recommend that you contact these people. Then there'll be another list of things to say, hey, these are things that we need to do a little more research on and get back to you. And then there'll essentially be a third list to say, these are things that are definitely need to be looked at in the TSP. And so these are gonna be the first of the table list that we send up through the ranks. So kind of like a short, medium, and long-term lists. Does that sound like a plan? Okay? Good.
Okay.
I think we're good.
So, no, and I'm good too. I think this is a good discussion. I mean, and hopefully we reined it in a little bit, as to the long-term and the near-term, yeah.
Remember, Don, watch what you say. We haven't had this work session yet. You should know better. You should know better.
Okay.
But no, and I think specifically, at least the first one of these is just us.
Yeah.
And then if there needs to be another one with the city council involved, then that's fine, but the first one really needs to be just this group.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to that, I think. And some of this relates to your direct authority on, you're the first shot and probably, in many cases, the only shot that, unless something's appealed for larger development. So it makes sense. There's an understanding around those items.
Okay.
And then also, I think I appreciate the fact that it's being brought up because, we were talking about alley standards, which that probably has never been a discussion full on in this city. And we probably need to know what those are. What should that be? What's behind our building here? How's that compared?
What's behind this building is actually okay. What's behind those buildings sucks. It's horrible.
No, exactly.
So,
but it's
yeah.
this is again, the global part of this.
It's funny you mentioned that. I've
Yeah.
had two neighbors ask about their alleyway in particular, and they're citing code that I don't even know exists about theirs is not paved, but everybody else's alley is paved, but they've got all these residents, and I'm like, I don't know how to answer that question right now,
Yeah.
but I'll get back to you.
Yeah,
I don't know.
and it depends on where that is. If it's downtown and possibly urban renewal, there's issues around that. And so, that's topic of discussion. I don't know where that's going to go. But there's all these parameters around. It depends on where you ask and what geographical part of the city you're in. And just collectively, hopefully that's my goal with the TSP update is hopefully in the end of that process, we're all in agreement on everything in the city as to what the standards are. Because it's been ironed out, vetted through the council and the planning commission, and this is what it is. And I think right now, we have standards, they've been adopted, they're accepted, but this will be a chance to reevaluate those as part of that TSP update.
Okay. I just so was there any other questions on that? Any other questions from the commission in general? Okay, then real quick, I just want to say, I appreciate, I hope that I will just say this pretty much a lot. I hope that I'm not don't feel like I'm stifling anybody's conversation, but I just am trying to be careful because I think as excited and as motivated as this group is, sometimes we bump up against the limits of what this group does, and I just want to make sure that we're always kind of coming back to center to make sure that we're not getting ourselves in trouble. So that's one of the things. Second of all, and I wasn't able to talk about this last time, so I'm going to do it now. If you were paying attention, the city council approved the codes that we sent forward regarding the food cart pods and such. And I attended that meeting just to watch how it went. And the council thanked this group for the work that they did and the time that they put into that, as well as city staff. And a point of interest was there were only 2 minor changes to the code. And so I think that speaks volumes for how we sent a very comprehensive and concise package that they felt comfortable moving forward with. So, kudos to this group and to the planning department. So, that's that. That's all I had. And I will not be at the meeting next week, so I have informed Vice Chair Heeb that he needs to be here. Procedurally, if he is not here, what happens?
Great question.
Do we need to
Well, I
vote
mean,
on
the
a
good.
vice
the
chair? I
good-
don't know.
The good news is it's going to be more of a work session.
Okay.
So it will not be,
Just need a quorum.
yeah, and, I
And you'll
think,
have a quorum.
yes, we should have a
Okay.
quorum, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
so I think that I will want somebody to kind of step into that role. I'm not asking for, show of hands, but just, if Commissioner Heeb is not available to attend, it's always good to have somebody direct the meeting.
Okay,
So, it doesn't need a lot of direction
okay.
because there's no
I'm
hearing.
sure,
on it. Yeah.
I will text him again to make sure he's here, but just as, I'd much rather be prepared, so.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's a good move, yeah.
Okay. So with that, I guess I will say Commissioner Hutchinson is one of the senior members. If that was to happen, would you be willing to facilitate that meeting?
It's just a work session?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
No problem.
Excellent. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Do I second it at this
You
point?
can move.
I move to second, no, I move to adjourn.
Okay.
That's right.
I second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is unanimous. We are adjourned. Good night, Canby, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.